Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Can Be podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Castle. My passion is to inspire you to be everything you want to be. And in this particular episode, my conversation is to help you understand boundaries and maybe what you don't want to be. Life coach Annie Henderson is with me today, and we're going to talk about boundaries for the holidays. She's going to discuss 6 boundaries and tips for how you can set those boundaries and keep those boundaries. Let's get started. All right, Annie, you and I did an episode a couple of weeks ago, and the conversation started and it evolved, as happens on these episodes each time. And we talked about just briefly boundaries, and I wanted you to come back on the show and talk about boundaries in a little bit more detail. I think that's a great topic this time of year. We've got the holidays coming up, so there's boundaries around relationships. And I think also establishing boundary around, where and how you spend your time and energy so that you have some left for the holidays. So can you talk about that with us and give us some tactics that we can all use in our lives?
Yeah. And like you said, great timing with holidays coming up.
Mm-hmm.
I even got this message yesterday. I won't say from who, but it was, if you didn't come by, I would have been upset. Right? Sometimes there's an assumption of this is the way it's always been. So naturally, things cannot change. And sometimes it takes someone to set some new boundaries. And it doesn't have to be mean, right? I work a lot with people pleasers, and there's this assumption that you're either people pleasing and bending over backwards and toting the line, or you're a selfish, bad person. And having boundaries is that beautiful middle ground, right? So I actually instead of just, we should keep boundaries, you can even break boundaries down into, depending on how detailed you want to get, about 6 different types of boundaries. So there's physical, there's
got to get my pen and paper. And if the audience isn't driving, I highly recommend you get pen and paper. Annie is a life coach that is available to you too, but always has great tactics. So get your pen and paper out.
Yes. So physical boundaries, right? Sometimes, and this has shifted a lot just as I've been a parent, right? I know growing up, it was, go for the holidays, go hug your grandma and grandpa. And now we're really getting into this body autonomy of, I don't have to hug people that I'm uncomfortable with, right? And a lot of times, right, if you are the grandparent, then that might be kind of upsetting, but it doesn't mean it has to be something you take personally. It could be, maybe I'll come up with a cool high five that I can do with this grandkid, or a fist bump, or it's just something that can evolve. It doesn't have to be.
Never, ever, ever even thought about that, but you're so right. That was the tradition. We're told to go hug your grandma or hug this person goodbye or hug them hello.
Expected,
it was expected.
Right? Yeah. So it's this physical thing. And even with church, I know Sam says she remembers being a little kid at church, and there was always this one man who would pinch her cheek really hard, and do that thing you see on TV. I don't think anyone's ever done that to me, but one of these, and it it stuck with her forever. But this is
so physical boundaries.
Yes, physical boundaries. What you're okay with, what you're not, right? Some people just naturally come in with a hug. So sometimes it might be beating them to it and being like, oh yeah, here's this fist bump for you. Right? I feel like fist bumps even became maybe even more popular during COVID, right? Especially as we're eating, right? We don't necessarily want to have whatever's on you in my food. So a fist bump's a perfect way to stay healthy as well. So having a plan, right? If you're not a hugger, if there's certain people that you are okay with hugging and some that you aren't, then being okay with that. And if it's your kiddo or your grandkid that you're wanting to support, making sure that you can stand up for that, right? Because we usually know our parents or grandparents and how they will react, what they'll take personally and what they won't. So being able to be there for support or an advocate to, whether it's shifting the subject or being like, oh yeah, that's okay.
So I would
So
suspect that means really having that conversation with your child that, hey, I know that in the past, this has been what I've encouraged you to do, but I understand that it's your body and you have a say so in who you do and do not hug. And I'm not pushing that any longer.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean you're a bad kid, right? You might see this look of hurt in the other people, but that's not about you. That's about them, what they're thinking in their head. And that's something that you can't control.
I love that. Okay.
And it's almost like a reteaching for ourselves. As we're teaching this younger generation, it's also stuff that we probably need to hear.
Love that. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
I've already learned something, and that's on number 1.
Woohoo. Well, sexual boundaries, right? That is also important. We won't dive as deep on this, but right. I've heard from clients that they feel they owe certain things. And that can go with people dating, right? Like, oh, you bought me a drink, I owe you something. Or even in marriages, right? There should be communication and ability to say no if it's a no. So that's tough. And that's again, things that we're taught, things that
it's a conditioning.
Yes.
It's conditioning.
And that's the one thing I talk to my clients a lot about is, if this isn't something you would teach your child, then it doesn't apply to you either, right? If you're like, no, I would tell my kiddo, they just need to say no, right? So you get that same grace and compassion. Next up is the emotional boundaries, right? And my favorite phrase to keep it nice and simple is, not my circus, not my monkeys. You go to a holiday function and someone is upset. Maybe you didn't bring the food they wanted you to. Or maybe, oh gosh, even my kiddo and I heard this one recently. You hurt my feelings, right? Sometimes it can be twisted, it can be spun. So knowing that I am responsible for my thoughts and my feelings and my actions, I'm not responsible for what they assume. What might have been twisted. I have no idea, they might have woken up on the wrong side of the bed. There could be so many reasons, and I'm not responsible for doing the detective work to figure it out. Right. So that's where we take care of ourselves and our emotions. These are emotional boundaries. It's okay to step away when you need to, right? You don't have to sit there. You're not family members, therapists and coaches.
Right.
You can step away. You could leave a party if you want to.
You know what I have noticed too is whenever you are listening, and it happens a lot of times with family that hasn't seen each other in a while. So you have, common people that in common that you feel like you need to catch each other up on other people's lives.
Oh gosh.
And so I have found myself engaged in one-on-one conversations where it's harder. I mean, it's not like I can just walk away, but I don't care about other people's problems. I have enough of my own. And so how do you handle that? I just listened in this particular case, I just listened and did not engage. And they finally understood I'm not going to participate in this conversation.
Right.
And because I really did, it's not that I didn't care about the person, but I certainly didn't care about their business. And I certainly don't want to hear about their problems.
Right.
How do you handle those conversations when they're one-on-one? I mean, what
right. When you need that eject button, when you need to be like, oh, I'm out.
I can't just step away when I'm the one captured in, it's a two-person conversation. I'm one of the two.
And I think that's where being intentional and knowing ahead of time, like, oh, I know this person, or even if it's not a specific person, but I might get wrangled into a conversation where like it's draining, right? If you go to a party or an event and there's an energy vampire where they're just slowly sucking the life from you and you're not going to be able to enjoy the rest of it, maybe having something to say to be like, oh, I've got to go to the restroom.
That's where I find myself playing with the kids. I'll play hide and seek and go toss balls.
Right? You can go play with the kids. Sometimes I definitely choose kids over adults, and that's okay, right? It's not like you're avoiding them all night,
right?
But catch up a little bit, and they don't get to monopolize your time.
Yeah,
right? Exactly. You can do this, and then be like, "All right, I'm going to go catch up with the kids."
Yep.
Have a great time. See you next year. Exactly. And that's okay.
Yeah. All right. Number 4.
All right. Spiritual religious boundaries. It's because I feel this way and have these beliefs does not mean that I can force them upon you or make you feel guilty. If you're think about the reason for you to come together, right? Is it to have and share love? Or is it to instill fear and be anxious and cause others to be anxious? Right? So if you come from a strong Christian background, then do the Jesus thing and be Christ-like. That's by loving others and sharing and having joy, not saying, quizzing them. You're wanting to be a positive role model, right? That goes for everybody. So as ourselves, think about that going forward. If there's maybe that parent or grandparent or someone that's going to get you in a conversation or make you kind of feel guilty about something that maybe you don't agree, right? Oftentimes it might be the same religion, but
but there's disagreement in interpretation. Yes.
Yeah. So know that you don't have to sit there and listen to that as either, right? Having those boundaries protects you. And guess what? And here's something that I say a lot with boundaries is usually boundaries are good for both sides, right? So in this kind of situation, this person probably isn't feeling good, right? They're maybe feeling stressed on the inside and having to have this conversation, right? You getting out of that conversation is good for you. It's probably also good for them. Not a healthy conversation either way. What are you going to say?
Well, and I think that, if you ever get to the root of all spiritualities and religion, they still have the common core root of love. I mean, that is at the core of all religions and spiritualities. And so, different interpretations of belief systems outside, if you could just remind everybody in the family, and everybody in these gatherings that it's really, truly all about love. Can we agree on that?
Yes, right? That feels like
from a place of love.
Yes, it feels like an easy yes of agreeing on that. And it might be, again, being intentional.
And I love you so much that I think that this conversation probably needs to go back to the kids or how great the food is or the things that we're grateful for.
Yes.
Instead of focusing on our differences.
Michelle, that's a great one. Like as they're in the middle of it, what are you grateful for this holiday season? Right? Some shift their focus. Right? There can be easy, gentle, playful ways to do this as well. It doesn't have to be a fight. It doesn't have to be hard feelings.
Even if they come back to you're avoiding me. Well, I don't really feel that way. I'm really curious. What are you grateful for this year? What's been great about this year? Tell me, update me about all of the great things that have happened to you.
Yes, right. Because sometimes if it's oh, how's everything going? If they're used to having complaining negative conversations, they will default to that. So if you prompt them with something, what are you grateful for this year? Then it goes in that direction. They might add a but so they can head back to the direction they're comfortable with. But at least you started off that way. Then you have some conversation. And then if you need to get out, you can. And you had that moment.
Yeah. All right. Number 5.
All right. 5. Financial. Financial or material, right?
Mhm.
You do not owe it anyone to loan them money. You do not owe anyone to loan them your car or your things, right? We can feel selfish. It doesn't mean that you don't have to, right? If it's someone that you love and you trust, go with it. But usually there's this gut feeling of, oh yeah, I trust this person with anything and everything. Yeah. And then there's this, oh no, oh, I wish they wouldn't have asked me this. Oh no, they've proven to me that maybe they're not the most responsible with finances or items or whatever it is.
Do you think sometimes that comes from if you asked to borrow something and I had it to give and I didn't feel worthy of having that thing already, then I would feel more likely that I needed to give because you asked. Do you think the inability to set those boundaries also gets tied into the whole I am worthy of this thing?
Yeah, it definitely can, depending on the person, right? So if it's some people, it's unworthiness, right? There's the common story of people that win the lotto and their identity doesn't match that person or that lifestyle. So they quickly spend it, get rid of it till they're back to their set point. So it can be some guilt. It can be some religious factors. It's usually, right, there's that selfishness piece. So knowing that, knowing what you're comfortable with, and with boundaries, and especially with people pleasers that I work with, being able to pause and give yourself some space to get back to someone can be huge. That way you have time to think about it. It's not on the spot, because sometimes on the spot, then it's a yes. So it might be like, let me get back to you.
So that could be, hey, can I borrow your car for just a couple of days? I know you guys have an extra one and I really need it. So when you would normally just say, yeah, I mean, agree to it.
Yeah.
Instead you go, I really don't see a problem with that, but I'm not quite sure. Let me think on that and get back to you tomorrow, and give yourself that space.
Right. Give some space to get out of that conversation, right? Have some quiet time to really see and think about how you actually feel. Because usually in the moment, based on the thought, whether it's a positive thought or a negative thought, we're usually flooded with a certain chemical. So
Right.
if you're answering within those 90 seconds or 120 seconds that it takes to filter through, you're being influenced by maybe oxytocin or whatever chemical, right? It might be adrenaline or something like that. So you're not actually going off of maybe gut or really thinking and making a good decision. You're maybe being influenced, or you're people pleasing. So that space gives you time.
Great suggestion. And that applies to all aspects of our life, really.
Yes. Time,
Making decisions
energy,
on the
money.
fly is not always a good idea. Most of the time, it's not a good idea.
Yeah.
Unless there's a bear chasing you and then you don't.
Yes. You know what? You saying that makes me think of like marriage proposals, especially the ones that are in front of like a stadium full of people.
Yes. It's not always a Hallmark movie.
No. I'm always so impressed with the people that are like, no, this isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
I got some pressure.
I'm not saying no, but I can't say yes right now under these circumstances.
Yeah, exactly. So number 6 is time. That's a huge one. I hear that one a lot with family. I had one of these today. Someone had asked if I could check on their dogs while they were going to an appointment out of town. And they're like, oh, can you come by at 2? And I'm like, oh, I have an interview at 2. And they're like, what about 1? And I'm like, well, I have appointments from 12 to 3. And they said, well, period. Never mind. Anyway, it wasn't like, okay, sure.
But what if you didn't have those boundaries? I mean, what if you didn't have a calendar that told you, no, yes, physically I can, but no, I can't. Right? What would you have done? I mean, how would you have handled that if you really did not want to take time out of your day to do that?
Yeah. So here's one thing I do recommend to a lot of my clients is just like I think I said this on my live this morning, just like it's recommended to plan your meals at the beginning of the week. That way you're not in the moment. You're not influenced by, oh, I don't have any energy. It's already pre-planned. So you take out the thought process and the stress behind it and prepping. Same thing for self-care. If you decide, so like my week, 8 o'clock every day is CrossFit is already set. So nothing else can be booked at that time. If you also book in self-care or lunch or whatever it is, it might just be me time. It doesn't necessarily have to be specific, but if it's on there, then you can say, let me look at my calendar. Oh, I can at that time. They don't need details. They don't need excuses or apologies. Just, oh, it's not going to work out.
But it's really important you honor yourself on your calendar as if it was an appointment with someone very important, because I've lived by I've created the life I want to live based on my calendar is based on the creation of the life that I want to live.
Yeah. Yes.
It took a long time, and I'm still not 100% at honoring my own self on my calendar.
Yeah.
I always show up for others. Oops.
Yes. Integrity for others. Spot on. Self-integrity. Whew, we will keep pushing that to the next day, and put ourselves last every time. And that will lead to burnout and overwhelm and exhaustion. So blocking time off. And a lot of people also might be good at about really scheduling their week. And then they feel like, oh, I don't want to do that on the weekend, but it's even important on the weekend. That way, if you need some you time, right? Maybe someone's like, oh, like Michelle, let's go and grab some dinner. And you're like, oh, I just did things the last 4 weekends. Like I just need some time, right? Booking time for yourself or dates, right? So making that time. And even if you're not sure, if you're just like, this time I need for me, this time I need for me and my fiance, and being intentional about it. Otherwise, there's a million different ways your time can get snatched up.
Absolutely. Gosh, such good tips. And it's just a conversation that I think that is so needed. But most importantly, I think, Annie, what we're telling people is really setting boundaries really just means that you've got to be firm in what it is that you need as a human to be happy and healthy, and being okay with saying no.
Yes.
Not this time, or sometimes no, not ever.
And knowing it is okay to do that. People do it all the time, right? So like the challenge is also to think of somebody in your life that does have good boundaries, that when they say no, you don't get mad or frustrated or even think twice about it. You're like, oh, they did that so well. And part of it is confidence, right? When we are confident, we have this different energy about us, and we're not apologetic, like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't do it. It's just, I can't have plans. Y'all have fun, right? There's a different energy to where they can walk away feeling good too, instead of things off.
That's a really good point. No can come across. You think no is a negative word, but you can say it differently where it comes off as very positive and energetic. And I think too, what's really important too is no can be a sentence in itself. You don't have to explain why it's a no. You just, no, I can't make that work, but you guys go have a great time. I can't wait to hear all about it.
Yes. Yeah. Say no, wish them well. And that's it. Right. But it takes practice. So if you're used to saying yes, yes, yes to all these things and giving away and not having any boundaries, going to feel a little uncomfortable as you retrain your brain and your body to have a different reaction, right? If someone asks you something, you probably tense up if you're just used to saying yes all the time. So to be able to say no, it takes that practice.
Absolutely. And speaking of practice, the one thing that I've been working on is really instead of a gratitude journal, I've been really working on, being my future self beginning today. So whatever it is that I want for myself in the future, I just behave like that today.
Yeah.
And so instead of a gratitude journal, I have an I am. So it's I am, and then I list out all of the things I am today. But I was just thinking, as you said that, I mean, and that becomes a practice too. Stepping into the truth of who I am today, not in the future. When I hit this, and this, I'll be that person. I want to be it today, because you can be, which is why you're listening to the Can Be podcast. But how cool would that be, though, if you were working on getting good at saying no? If you just wrote down, if you just reflected, ooh, today I said no to this, and this. And by saying no to this, and this, I said yes to this, and this. And so really taking that reflection and really celebrating the times that you said no to something else, so that meant that you either said yes to yourself or yes to someone that you really needed to, wanted to spend some time with, or spend, loan something to, or, whatever it is.
That's an excellent idea. I've heard it said this way.
Okay.
So like, even after maybe a coaching consultation call where someone's like, yes, this is what I need. Sometimes if we're left alone with our mind, if it's been a negative place, it's like leaving a little kid alone in a bad neighborhood. You wouldn't want to do that. So I like what you said about once you say the no, because usually someone says no and then they start beating themselves up and feeling guilty. Instead, start celebrating, like you said, right away, and being like, oh, now I have more energy. Now I can choose to do this. Now I get to spend quality time with my family, and just think about what that will do, not just in the short term, but
what that no really meant. What does that say yes to?
Excellent idea.
I love it. Well, let's wrap up this episode, and I definitely want to have you back, because you always have such great tools and tricks for people pleasers out there. And there's plenty of us that need your help. So, but thank you, audience. Absolutely. So for those of you guys, you can watch and stay up with what Annie is talking about and doing in the virtual world. Annie, what's the best way to find you?
My website's fine. It is anniemhenderson.com.
Love it. And then she's also on Facebook and very active there, but go check her out on the website. And thank you for listening to another episode of the Can Be podcast. Share this podcast this episode with others who could really benefit from the conversation, which I suspect is quite a few people, especially with the holidays coming up. Our time's going to be cramped, our calendars are going to be full, and people are going to take our time, our money, our energy, and all of that unless we learn to say no and set some good, healthy boundaries. So if you have not already subscribed, please do so and leave a review. And thank you for listening to another episode of the Can Be podcast.